Namaste. A very warm welcome to all our viewers watching us today from all across the world. Big namaste from all of us here in Shivpuri. Today, we are continuing the series like we have been in the past couple of months to interact with various scholars and eminent personalities in the field of Vedic sciences and Vedic research and arts and culture. And today, I am very happy to interact with Shri Nilesh Oak. Namaste, Nilesh.
Namaskar.
I don't need to introduce Nilesh actually. Anybody who has ever watched anything related to Vedas or India or Indian culture, Indian civilization, has seen Nilesh's videos, has seen his work a lot. Nilesh, it will be interesting for you to know that when I announced that we are going to conduct a discussion session with you, I was flooded with messages of congratulations first, and then ask him this, ask him that. We want him to elaborate on this, elaborate on that. So you are a very popular person, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people who are waiting to ask you questions, and thousands more waiting to hear you speak today, sir. So
Thank
thank
you.
you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for giving us this time early, so early up in the morning for you in America. I hope we haven't disturbed you too much, sir.
No, not at all. It's my pleasure. I mean, and I'm very much looking forward to discussing with you, and also with a limited time we have answering some interesting questions.
So I'll quickly, as a formality, I don't need to introduce you,
Sure.
but as a formality, I'll do that. So Nilesh ji is an author, a researcher, and a speaker, and also a corporate consultant. He holds a MS in chemical engineering and also has an executive MBA. He is a prolific writer who has written many books which are very popular and have sold many copies worldwide. He also has been working tirelessly in doing research on the ancient Indian philosophy, in ancient Vedic philosophy, Indian scriptures, Indian ideas, Indian narratives, and has been at the forefront of putting a scientific perspective and a very contemporary image and shape to the ancient, what we call as ancient. I don't like the word ancient, but the timeless actually. It's a
Hmm.
timeless. It's never obsolete. Ancients usually become obsolete, but the Vedic philosophy is as relevant today as it was 10,000 years ago. So Nilesh has been playing a very crucial role in shaping this whole idea in the modern contemporary time based on scientific research methodology that he has been very keenly and very precisely been following for the last many years. He also is today an adjunct faculty at the Institute of Advanced Sciences in Dartmouth in USA. Amongst a lot of work that he does, he also is a very popular YouTube personality today, and whose videos have had thousands and thousands of views. And I think some of the best minds in this field today working, collaborating with Nilesh ji on various factors. So Nilesh ji, I will please request you to please begin your presentation, and post that we can have a discussion on some of the questions that I have been asked to ask you, sir.
Okay. So
Stage is yours.
thank you, Purushottam ji, and my greetings to everyone who is listening. Of course, we could, in principle, do this in Marathi also, but
Yeah.
to reach a wider audience, we will do it in English. Maybe some other time we will consider doing it in Marathi.
We should do in Marathi someday, sir.
Okay. All right. So what I want to do is take maybe around 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, quickly put some thoughts in front of everyone. Now, this is, I mean, as you said, I have given many talks or continue to have many discussions. So what I try with my limited ability brain to every time bring a certain aspect, a unique aspect of the civilization. So I'm calling Indian civilization, and we will talk about we have to start with what we know.
Ji.
So like a matrubhasha, you may start with Marathi, but that doesn't stop you from learning other languages.
Ji.
It is the same thing. And as people know, if they know two languages, learning the third language becomes easy.
Yes.
And so in that sense, we will start with our civilization. But the lessons are meant for like timeless, as you said correctly, and also for geography. So desha kala patra, but beyond a specific geography. And
Yes.
sometimes we need to make appropriate changes. Depend if it's going to be Canada, the dress code might be different. So that's required. All right. So with that, let me start sharing.
Yes.
Okay. So I gave a title, said how to derive useful insights from ancient Indian narratives. Now the beauty of uh, Indian civilization, and that's not to say it's necessarily unique to Indian civilization, but it's very prominent about Indian narratives, Indian what you call intellectual work, is that they don't go, if they want to talk about something, they immediately first jump and give the definitions as to what they are before even discussing it. So how to derive useful insights from ancient Indian narratives? So let me start with what are ancient Indian narratives. So obviously, those people who already know it, that's fine. Those who don't know, we again, what we're talking of the Vedic literature. So like four Vedas, for example, and that means like Samhitas. But after that, there is works like Brahmanas. Then there are Upavedas, Sutra literature, Agama literature, Vedangas, okay, Smriti literature, Itihasa. So that's what I mean by ancient Indian narratives. Okay, for a lack of, because scripture is also unfortunately a word that we shouldn't use as a scripture, because it has a different connotations. Okay, so sometimes people understand what it means, other times they don't. So narratives is, this is the term given by Rajiv Malhotraji, by the way, ancient Indian narratives, and I love it and I use it. Okay, so now what we mean by useful insights. Now when we look at our ancient or antiquity, and you said correctly that you don't like the word, I'm stuck with that word, because most of my work is been on the historical narratives. But why do we even study it? If it was simply just to know how old it is and feel good about it, well, that's a certain aspect of it. But there has to be something more that is relevant to our times and for the future. What you will find, for example, I'm just going to quote something from Rigveda. People who have not studied Rigveda, and actually that includes me. I mean, as much as I'm studying it for many years, I cannot study Rigveda without the help of like multiple translations. So I use Satavadekar translation, I use 10 other translations, and still, you're not 100% sure. But with whatever little that I have looked into, I have found it fascinating in the sense of how pragmatic or non-dogmatic the content of Rigveda is. And what you find is there are many layers to it. For example, someone reading Bhagavad Gita, if that person wants to see bhakti, he sees bhakti in it. If someone wants to see yoga, he sees yoga in it, jnana, buddhi, whatever you want, karma yoga, you can get into it. That's the beauty of Bhagavad Gita, because there are different layers of that understanding. This is Rucha from Rigveda's 8th mandala. And if you look at a very what you call, say, a face level, what this is saying, it is a praise done by Rishi to Indra. So it can be simply seen as a praise. But Purushottamji, I gave a presentation a few years ago on this in Boston area, on there, just using these words to explain the pedagogy of Rigveda. Now that was my interpretation with whatever I had learned. But so let's look at this verse, and I want to talk about the non-dogmatic, or how practical the view of Rigveda is, and therefore everything that follows from it, like our itihas and whatnot. So Om Tvanno Asya Amate Rutakshudo O Abhishaste Ravasprudi Tvanna Uti Tava Chitrayam Diya Shiksha Shachishta Gatuvita. This is from Rigveda 8 Mandal, 66 Sukta and 14th Richa. And what is instead of going directly into the meaning, what I did with it, I'll just show you. But my intention is to show you how pragmatic, practical it is. So, for example, this can be simply seen as a prayer to Indra, as I said. But if you start meditating on this verse, you can get some different meanings. And the meaning that you may find useful to you depends on what you do. So now my time has been spent in a corporate world, but also in a lot of corporate consulting, corporate training. And so therefore I saw that meaning. That doesn't mean everyone has to see that meaning in it. Okay, so for example, I felt it gives a beautiful description of the model of a pedagogy. What is the role of a teacher, what is the role of a student, what should come out as a true output out for the education, and how to do it. What's the method. And so I'm going to use some words from there. So it's Tvanno Asya Amate Ruta Kshudo Abhishastu. So we saw three words, Amati Kshuda Abhishastu. And I'm going to do that as a crude translation. So this is what a student, like here, a Rishi wants Indra to give it to him in the way they share the skills. He's not saying just give me. He says, please share the skills that will allow me to get rid of Amati, solve the problem of Kshuda, and Abhishastu is like a disease, health, or curse. Okay. And so he wants that education, he wants that training from Indra, but it can be also seen here as from a Acharya, from somebody who knows. And so what is he asking? He's asking for that intellect to get rid of Amati, okay, ability to produce, resources, etc., to take care of the Kshuda, now the Kshuda of a body, Kshuda of a mind. And then you can call it a Rakshan Shakti, like a risk analysis, to protect yourself. Okay, so that's what it's asking. And of course, what is the outcome? And the outcome is also described there. Indra here is called a Gatuvit. That's very interesting in the sense that as a role of a mentor. Okay, so Gatuvit is like a path, to show me the pathfinder. And he's called Sreshta, someone who is capable, someone who is expert. Okay, and what this Rishi is asking, or the student is asking the teacher, is to create a web, create a framework, that can be used to solve our everyday problems. The quickly point I want to make is that a verse, a sukta or a rucha, something that can be felt very esoteric, and yes, it is in a very Rigvedic language, but its concerns are actually very practical. Amati, the lack of wisdom or ignorance, Shuddha, the hunger, and Abhishastu, to have a proper health. Quickly, those people who don't necessarily can read Nagri, I've just made some crude translations. Take it as only crude translation: wisdom, wealth, health. Okay, and how do you do it? Repetition, revenue, risk. These three words, Purushottam ji, are words of my good friend and a wonderful food expert, Dr. Jnanesh Darshani. So he also lives in Atlanta here. So he always talks of anything we do together. He says talks of repetition, revenue, and risk, and that's kind of has a correlation with wisdom, wealth, and health. And just quick translation: as a mentor, the person being effective as a shrestha, capable, and the frameworks. So now the question I want to pose is, do you have what it takes to use this knowledge or to solve the problems or solve our curiosities? And the three words, I'm again taking this from Bhagavad Gita, is Shraddha, Sanshay, and Jidnyasa. And this is partly from, actually I'm presenting this framework, but partly from it's useful, but partly from my frustration. And just briefly, I shared that with Purushottam ji just before we began. But I'll get to that, which is this. So sanshay, and as soon as we hear the word sanshay, either, I mean, two kinds of reactions go through. People may take this as a devil's advocate, and they say that's a good thing. And but we also hear in Bhagavad Gita, sanshayatma vinashyati, total destruction will happen. So what to make of a sanshay? Well, sanshay is a very useful concept, okay, but it has like two extremes. And then another one I'm going to pull is a Shraddha. Now, again, as soon as you hear the word Shraddha, immediately people think that means a blind belief, and so very negative, so much negativity attached to that word Shraddha, which is absolutely wrong. Because if you again read Bhagavad Gita, you will see the whole spectrum of a Shraddha and also whole spectrum of a Samshaya. For example, if you look at Samshaya, Bhagavad Gita, when it says Samshayatma Vinashyati, it is referring to Samshaya of a mind. Now, if you go to Nyaya Darshana, then it says Pramana, Prameya, Samshaya, Drishtanta. That Samshaya, it says, is a required ingredient if you want to know something, right? So the Samshaya of a buddhi is good. Samshaya of a mind is to be controlled. Same thing with the Shraddha. Shraddha can be of a different kind, so from Sattvic Shraddha all the way to Tamasic Shraddha. And I'll go quickly through this. So if you just put these two elements, it can create these four quadrants. And look at the Shraddha. What does it do? That you can see around the world. So Dharma can inspire, a Shraddha can inspire, even the religion, ideologies, even they inspire. Right or wrong is a different issue, but they inspire. Okay, they can generate lot of karma. Okay, they can generate lot of activities, lot of action. So that karma shakti is a boon of a Shraddha, we can say. But we also need the Jnana Shakti to guide that Karma Shakti. So that comes from this Samshaya, but I'm saying that comes from the Buddhi. It's a Samshaya of a Buddhi that will, the curiosity, but it will take you there. And just a quick metaphor so that people don't feel it's that these are heavy words, Karma Shakti and Jnana Shakti. I don't know if everyone has seen this, but what this person has, this is called K4 or K5 system. People who are, say, physical disabilities, they find it this as a wonderful thing, but even other people also like to use it. This is an accelerator. The person that is pressing with his hand is actually accelerator on the car. Instead of doing with the foot, you can just do it there, and you can also put it on the cruise. But think of this as that Karma Shakti, okay, that propels the car forward. But you also need a steering wheel to keep it on the road. Okay, that is that Jnana Shakti. I'm just using that as a metaphor. Now you can see if one of the two is missing, it's a challenge. If you don't have anything to propel it, you have a car, but it's useless. You can't go anywhere with it. And if you don't have a steering wheel, just acceleration is going to lead to a disaster. So if one of the two is lacking or both of them are lacking, it leads to a dysfunctionality or a dependency. And what does that lead to? So, for example, the bottom left-hand corner, the person with that kind of mindset or a frame will be fearful, confused, time waster. Usually, you will see a cognitive dissonance that comes out of them in the discussion, in what they do, and so on. If you go to the top left-hand corner, the Shraddha is there, but still the person is dealing with I agree, I disagree, I'm not convinced, and so on and so forth. That usually confuses the claims. Such a person confuses claims or data with the truth. If you come to the bottom right, now the buddhi is there, but the shraddha is not there. And then the person may confuse whatever he or she knows for the truth. And the behavior could be arrogant, could be brash, could be aimless. There is no specific purpose. And what is desired is something that is the top right hand corner, which is validates something that allows that person, the shraddha, sattvic shraddha, but also sattvic buddhi, that allows them to validate and contextualize the data and knowledge. And this is where the context comes, that why are we studying our ancient Indian narratives? Because ultimately we want to gain the insights from there and use it for our life here and now, and also for the future. All right, so quickly, if I add one more thing, so I'm going to go fast through this. This is what you already saw. The samshaya leads, the buddhi leads to jnana shakti. The Sattvic Shraddha will lead to Karma Shakti of a good kind, you can say. And I'm going to add one more, which is a Jidnyasa. And again, as I said, this came from my experience and a little bit of my frustration also, in a positive way, I'm saying it. Many times with Jidnyasa, what happens is people they think Jidnyasa means curiosity, and it's partly true. But it's something more. For example, Jidnyasa, you can translate as a kutuhal, and that's a lower side of a Jidnyasa. But you need a very specific purpose, like a aim, nishchay, prayojan, okay, the prayojan, then a useful stuff come out of it, and I'm calling that ichha shakti. And at the lower bottom, it will be ineffective as a matching of these three forces. And at the top right hand corner, it will be a effective combination. And now naturally, we are somewhere in between, all of us, and our goal is to get to that top corner. I'll go quickly through this, but see, these came out of the frequently asked questions I get. One is like, sometimes they will say, okay, you have done so much work, will you be my guru in doing something like this? And I said, well, I'm not qualified to be guru and anything, but I said, okay. So the person insists. I said, fine. And I'll say, okay, so what should I do? And I say, well, start reading Bhagavad Gita, for example. And the person says, no, 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 that's not what I want to do. Then I said, I cannot be your guru, So people take it so lightly, The same thing they will do. Why don't you write about X, whatever that subject is? Usually what they mean is they want somebody to write, or they want to know, therefore they're asking you to write. Well, that's not how it works, because whatever that person feels passionate about may not be my passion or somebody else's passion. If you feel passionate about something, then you have to do it, and then other people will join. And same thing applies for why don't you study. And Purushottamji, I'm sure you get these kind of things to you too. You are doing great work, but now people want you to do more. Okay, and
All
so
the
they,
time.
why don't you go ahead?
All the time, I said.
all the time, yeah. And so they say, why don't you study this, why don't you do this, and it's a very what you call say waste time, just even answering that. And then they start thinking you are arrogant, or you are giving a very brisk answer, you are mocking them, and so on and so forth. But that is the risk one has to take. All right, what I'm going to do is, so I talked about the shraddha, the sanshay, and a jidnyasa. I'm going to take the illustration using my work on the Mahabharata in the context of these three. And just to illustrate how the journey happens, it's not something that you say, oh, I want to do that, and you just do it. Because another challenge I see for many of the people who interact with me, and I understand, I mean, they have the absolutely right intentions, but they are not aware that how much effort it takes, how much work it takes, and how there is no guarantee of a success. So many think doing some research of anything is as simple as going to a telephone company, buying a smartphone, coming home, plugging it in, charging it, and it starts working. They think it's like a plug and play. Well, it is not plug and play, and I want to just give an illustration of that. So let's begin with Shraddha. One example I want to use, and many who would be listening to it would have listened to this. Some of them might be even tired of it, and actually I'm tired of talking about it, but I realize that I can never be tired of talking about this as long as it is required to be said. So something, my journey in the Mahabharata, or why I am famous, whatever that little famous I am, is it started with this observation. Okay, that AV observation refers to Arundhati Vasishtha observation, and it is a one sentence, one shlok from Mahabharata that I randomly ran into when I was studying in Canada. And that shlok is from Bhishma Parva, just before the war is going to begin. Bhishma is telling various things to Dhritarashtra to see if at the last minute the war can be stopped. This is a statecraft. And as a part of this, Vyasadeva is telling many things to Dhritarashtra. I might have said Bhishma. Vyasadeva is saying many things to Dhritarashtra and saying, look, it doesn't look good. See if we can avoid the war. And he's giving all kinds of different signs that are, he's saying, the nimitta. And one of the nimitta that he mentions there is Yachaisha Visruta Rajas Trailokya Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Tayapesha Vasishta Prushtata Pruta. Quickly, that meant like Arundhati, the star Arundhati, is walking ahead of Vasishta. Now, what was the big deal about it? So this is, I'm telling that Shraddha also comes into picture, but also Jidnyasa and also the Buddhi comes into picture. First thing, you should know what Arundhati is, what Vasishta is. That is the realm of Buddhi, knowledge, etc. Then to test this, so to see if this is true, because why such a big deal? Because in our times, if you look at it in the sky, Vasishta, the star Vasishta, is walking ahead of Arundhati. If you go backward in time for thousands of years, 1000, 2000, 3000, 4000, 5000, 6000, still Vasishta is walking ahead of Arundhati. But interestingly, Vyasa is saying at the time of Mahabharata, Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. And many astronomers, famous astronomers like Shankar Krishna Dikshit, C.V. Vaidya, many others had said this is impossible. Astronomically, it's impossible. Many Western Indologists use this to show how Indians have no knowledge of astronomy to that extent. Okay, so when I said, why would Vyasa write something that totally doesn't make sense? So that is the Shraddha aspect I'm talking. Anyways, I want to go fast through this. And so I thought very naively that, okay, I knew Arundhati, that's Alcor. I knew Vasishta, that's Mizar, Saptarshi. I said, okay, maybe I'm going to spend, me being an engineer, I'm going to spend one weekend and solve this. And then it humbled me, of course. It took me 15 years to solve this one verse. 15 years from 1995 to 2009. Anyways, so quickly, I'll just show you the visual demonstration of this. This is how the scene looks like in our times. That's the pole star. And then the Vasishta and Arundhati. The movement is like anti-clockwise. So if you see from the earth, this is how we will see from the earth. And you will see, because the movement is anti-clockwise, you will see Vasishta is walking ahead and Arundhati is following behind. Now, this is the scenario for last 6,500 years. And this is how it would look, going from right to the left. But something magical happens if you go back beyond 6,500 years, specifically 4508 BCE. and all the way up to 11,091 BC. So going back to like say 13,000 years from 6,500 years. In these two specific years, what you would have seen if we were there is that nobody's behind, nobody's ahead, nobody's behind, which is to say gender equality, perfect gender equality in modern language, right? So Arundhati, Vasishta, nobody ahead, nobody behind. So Arundhati is and Vasishta right on the meridian, and they were always together, seen from anywhere, okay, in the northern hemisphere. Any time, by the way, when they are making a circle, it's not just when crossing the meridian. That was the scenario 11,091 BCE. That was also the scenario in 4508 BCE. And then the last magic happens. In between these in this interval between these 2 years, anytime if anyone was watching Arundhati Vasishta from the earth, okay, they would have seen, because of the astronomy phenomenon, they would have seen Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishta. So here at the meridian, I'm showing because it's easy for people to see and comprehend that going from right to the left, anti-clockwise, Arundhati has crossed the meridian, Vasishta has yet to cross the meridian, therefore Arundhati is ahead. And that was the case. And then this started with a one astronomy observation, then I extracted 300 plus astronomy observations, solving like a jigsaw puzzle, crossword puzzle, and I came at 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharat war. Okay, so that was the big deal about this. Important point is, yes, I needed a buddhi, I needed some knowledge of astronomy, I needed to have a specific prayojan to say that, can I test this observation to see what Vyasadeva is saying in Mahabharata? Was it true? If it was true, when it was true, and what is the consequence of it? Okay, that's what I wanted to check. Now that was the point of a shraddha. Like many people ask me, when you are failing continuously, what is it that kept you working on this Arundhati Vasishta observation? And I said Shraddha. Shraddha in the words of Vyasa. Okay. I mean, during that time, people called me nuts, crackpot, and all this. I mean, that happened. And I, of course, took it very sportingly. But my point is, and that also happens now. I mean, people will call me very arrogant and all those things you will hear. And then other people will call me humble, and then I just read Tukarama's Avanga. So people will say on all kinds of things, you just do Vittal, Vittal, say do the Harinam. Quickly, the second point of a Sangshay. Now, what this is the beauty. This is the beauty of doing any activity, and that's why the emphasis on the Karma Yoga. So, without Shraddhavan Labate Jnanam, and then when Arjuna asks, so why are you asking me to do the work, like fight, when you're also saying the Buddhi Yoga is a superior to Karma Yoga? And then Krishna says, well, without karma, you cannot even get the buddhi. You cannot get the jnana also. So, but here what you want to show is, I started somewhere, but how it leads, I mean, it never ends. That wonderful journey never ends. It leads to many more complex things of a higher importance. So once I established 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharat war based on Arundhati Vasishta observation and planetary observations, I come into this problem. So Samshaya, I want to show you the role of Samshaya and what wonderful things it can do. And that's related to Bhishma Nirvana. So what was the Samshaya? The Samshay, for example, was the status quo limbo that I inherited when I completed my Arundhati Vasishta work in 2009. So when I started putting together just an effort to see when Mahabharata war would have happened, this is one reference that came continuously from almost every Mahabharata researcher, at least who talked about Bhishma Nirvana. And this is what it said. From the 10th day of the war, when Bhishma fell in the battle, and then he was on the bed of arrows, Sharashaya, until the day of winter solstice. And that duration was 58 days. That is what every Mahabharata researcher who talked about Bhishma Nirvana claimed. Now, I have no, just again go back to Shraddha, I have no reason to doubt that. So I said, okay, that must be true. But it was not matching for my date. It was not matching for 5561 BC. I said, well, everything else is matching. I mean, there are like by that time possibly 60 references, and 60 references that nobody had matched. They were matching for this 5561 BC, but this Bhishma Nirvana 58 days was not matching. I said, well, actually, I wrote it down in my book, and it's still there. Which is to say, while the theory is successful, 5561 for everything else, too bad Bhishma Nirvana doesn't match. I wrote it down, and then I kept it even when I solved this problem. So finally, I said, what could be the issue? And then when I started studying Mahabharata, and that's where your karya shakti is very important beyond the jnana shakti, is that you cannot leave it to others. Okay, you cannot assume that whatever others have done is necessarily the last word. Okay, you should have a shraddha, that's where you begin, but you have to investigate on your own. So what I noticed is actually that this claim of 58 days was careless and casual. Okay, I mean, almost by every Mahabharata researcher. Now, Purushottamji, when I say that, people think I'm mocking them or I'm being arrogant. Okay, but actually, I'm just stating a fact here. Okay, and then this failure, I'm saying that 58 days actually, beautiful, amazingly, it did not even match for the claim that they had for the year of Mahabharata. So how did they explain it? Well, they tried to explain in one way or the another. They tried to justify manipulation and so on and so forth, sort of going away from the Satya. And I realized that the cause appeared to be they did not bother to read Mahabharata text because it's not some complicated astronomy or anything. And even now, I would say Mahabharata researchers, many Mahabharata researchers, not all, refuse to read the Mahabharata text.
Yeah.
So what did I find? So this is from the Sangshay. So I said 58 doesn't make sense. Maybe they are right, and I am wrong, at least on the Bhishma Nirvan. But let me just verify that. So I went and started studying Mahabharata. I studied many, many times. I mean, read it many times. 30 plus times is a number that I say. I don't actually remember. And I read some specific portions. But this is what I found. And I'll go fast through that because I have talked about this many times in other places. Essentially, what I found is that Mahabharata is so rich in chronology evidence that doesn't leave any doubt whatsoever and shows that the Bhishma was on the bed of arrows for minimum of 92 days or definitely more than 92 days. And as soon as that happened, it solved all the problems. Okay, all the problems for my timeline, I would say. Okay, and in fact, some wonderful gift came out, and therefore I'm just using this verse from 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Yatadagre vishamiva pariname amrutopamam tatsukam satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam. Because vishamiva initially, because I was frustrated for possibly like 2 years, trying to say what is happening. And but the list I'm going to give you here, like eight, I call it poison pills. Some people don't like the word poison, but be it as it may. These eight things is something such a wonderful, factual, empirically, objectively testable list for the Mahabharata research. That if somebody has we are just talking the chronology aspect here, but this knowledge can be expanded to any other aspect of Mahabharata, the Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. I'm just talking here of a specific historical moment. One can ask this question and say, is this true for this particular claim for the year of Mahabharata war? If any one of this is not true, then that Mahabharata year cannot be the correct claim. Okay, it is that powerful, and it's not just one. And this is something that can be objectively testable. Quickly, I'm almost at the end. Jidnyasa, the third axis that I discussed. And so now it was a jidnyasa of other people after they came across my work. And also it was a jidnyasa of mine. So I said, okay, so the Bhishma Nirvana was going to give me a shock. It doesn't match for my date. But actually, when I went to Mahabharata, Mahabharata said, here you go, it does match. I said, well, what if all the 300 plus astronomy evidence is taking me to that one specific year? What about other disciplines of science? What can we find from the other disciplines of science? And many people, many other researchers were also asking this question. So is there evidence from other disciplines of science? And I'm not going to go into the detail, but this is from 2011 onwards, so say last 9 years or so. So that astronomy is where I began with actually one observation, then 300 plus observations. But then, to my amazement, and hopefully you share the audience who is watching this shares this amazement, that no matter which discipline of science I touch, if I could find the evidence, because we can talk only of the evidence that we have, we cannot talk of the evidence that we don't have. But if the evidence existed, and if it had a context of it went that as far back as the timing of Mahabharata 5561 BC that I'm referring to, then every time, no exception, it came and supported this year. So that's multidisciplinary year. I'll just read a few names: osmology, oceanography, geology, archaeology, domestication of animals, agriculture, climatology, paleobotany, Then other ancient Indian narratives like Ramayana, does it fit right into this? And the other literature like Upanishad and Sutra literature, Surya Siddhanta or Siddhanta, astronomy Siddhanta literature, chronology, genetics, you just name it. Rigveda, even that also very smoothly matches with this jigsaw puzzle. Okay, this is quickly my work. Again, number of people would have seen it, so I'll not go much into it. What I did for Mahabharata, I did the same thing for Ramayana, more than 600 references from Valmiki Ramayana. And then using the hydrology evidence initially, I did this for Rigveda. That shows that Rigveda, the oldest portion of Rigveda, definitely going back more than 22,000 BC. And then now I'm validating, I have already validated through genealogy of the Rigveda genealogy information, but now I'm actually studying it some by 7 different means, the Rigveda chronology that includes astronomy, geology, and whatnot. All right, I want to go fast through this. And one last one. Now, some people would say, okay, so where do we start this curiosity, or where do we have this Shraddha? Shraddha about what? Or what knowledge we start? Where do we start studying this thing? These are also frequently asked questions. Well, everyone has to find their own answer. But here I will say, you don't have to start from a scratch. Okay, the world always existed before even we were born. So there are intelligent people there, super intelligent people before us. Okay, so for example, if we hear something, we can start with a shraddha, maybe accept it and then share it with others if it convinces us. But if it doesn't convince us, that's not the end of the world. Okay, actually that's not even a bad thing, because then we should study it deeply and be convinced. That is when we need to put our efforts. Okay, so adhyaya pravachanecha, we need to make use of our pradnya, intellect, buddhi, and study it deeply and understand it, comprehend. If you don't agree with it after understanding it, you can critique it. You critique it brutally, critique it logically. Okay, in a meaningful fashion, not just to put the other person down. Okay, and even better thing is if you can bring this jidnyasa and the karya shakti and jnana shakti together and present even a alternate and a superior claim. And that would be a good segue for our discussion, Purushottamji. But so, and then the last message, like in the style of a Ramdas Swami, I would say, So, but there are people who will not do any of this, and they would keep on doing the vada of some kind. And I said, at some point you have to give up and say, okay, take a hike. The American style. I'm saying, okay, or in a very polite language, get lost. So at some point you have to give up because they just waste time. All right. Quickly, these are my books, but I don't want to spend time on that. If you're in India, that's on the right side of the thing from Subbu Publication. If you're outside India, from Amazon. And Purushottamji, that's my last slide. I went 4 minutes over the 30-minute target I had set to myself. Back to you, sir.
You can have another 40 minutes if you want, sir.
Well, Samvada would be even a better idea, right?
I think, I mean, I've always studied. My father was himself an Indology student. He got a PhD in Sanskrit and Pali from the Pune University with a gold medal for his research on the Vedic sciences, especially Veda itself. And he studied Sanskrit many years, and I studied Sanskrit a little bit myself. Myself did masters in Ayurveda. I'm an MD in Ayurveda, so I have that background as well. What amazes many people, I think, from what the last or the second last slide you just showed, was human civilization this advanced even 5,000, 10,000, 12,000 years ago? I think that is something that they don't get. That hey, weren't we living in caves? And suddenly you're talking about genetics and astronomy and metallurgy and agricultural research done 10,000 years ago. And that is something that baffles them a lot. That how is that even possible? Because many times they correlate all of that with modern day India. And they say, hey, if all of this was happening in your part of the world, where is it today?
Yeah.
All the technology that you today use is not based out of India. It's been developed in various parts of the world. I think that's where we need to understand that this is not India specific, like you just very well mentioned, that the remnants could be found here in India. And today, by God's grace, there are Indian researchers who focused on Indian narrative, who are doing the research on human civilization. This was a human civilization that was well advanced in its technology, in its sciences, in philosophy, and even public discourse for that matter, that shaped a lot of the civic society back then, that shaped geopolitics back then. And it was a well advanced human civilization. It was not all rock and stones. It was people doing, I mean, like the fact that something like a Ramayana was written 12,000 years ago. I mean, the poetic language, the fanciful words, the flourish of poetry, all of that, leave alone the story of Rama and Sita and their family. But the sheer beauty of the Kavya itself is fascinating. The sheer fact that somebody like a Maharshi Valmiki could recreate this beautiful journey in such poetic format. I mean, that I think is something that baffles people a lot. Would you want to make a comment on that, sir?
Okay. Yes. I mean, great. Understand why people feel baffled. A couple of points I would say. One is as far as the Indian civilization goes, and when they ask why we not find the things here, well, first thing is we actually do find things.
Yeah.
Okay, people have to take the initiative. So adhyaya pravachanacha, read on their own, search, and they will find more than they can consume in one lifetime.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number one. The second one is it's a actually 3 points now. Second one is it's a continuous civilization. And what happens in a continuous civilization is that the things get used, reused, modified. So metal can be melted again, the plastic can be recycled and reused again. So that's the second point.
Yeah.
And that's why we will not find some of the things because, well, we are using them. Maybe it's in our home in a different form.
Yeah.
And the third point is the emphasis or the effect of one of the Western historical model. It can be said in the words like a uh, arrow of time. The Western historical model looks at the civilization, the development of civilization, the growth of civilization in this fashion. They essentially, for that view, the single arrow of time, you can say, or linear arrow of time, what we are today as a humanity, let's say, is the most sophisticated form of humanity that the earth has ever seen or the universe has ever seen. And as we go back, according to this view,
Yeah.
we get inferior and inferior, less intelligent, and so on.
Yeah.
Now, that is a faulty model.
Yeah.
Okay, so initially when people thought that's maybe understandable, 100, it's not very old model, by the way. It's like we're talking 300, 400 years max. But if you actually study the world civilizations, all civilizations, and that's the hey, Vishwachi Maze Gara, or basically what Krunvanto Vishwarya, right? If you go to South America, amazing civilization, like the whole Incas. And again, these names are also faulty. Just like in India, something they dug somewhere, and in Harappa area they found something they call Harappa civilization. What? I mean, that's Indian civilization. That's a Vedic civilization and whatnot. So short answer there is that because of that model, the linear arrow of time, where we are the most sophisticated, and everything else, as we go backwards, we go towards monkey, so to say. That is a faulty understanding.
Yeah.
In reality, the evidence tells us that the civilization actually goes through ups and downs. They can go to a very glorious phase of a civilization in terms of science, culture, technology, and etc. And actually it can get destroyed, and then it needs to be resurrected. So that's a good and a bad news, which also means if we are not happy with where India is today, that is not a reason for pessimism. We can turn this thing around, and some of the things can be turned around very fast, like you see in astronomy also.
Well, another concept I would also was very impressed what you said was because when you go back in time in terms of a calendar year, we consider a calendar year to be like a samvatsar. We go back each year, but then there is the concept of yugas, and then there is the concept of kalpa. That yata apurva kalpayam, like Krishna says, as was in the earlier kalpas. So I think that is a very complex understanding of creation itself that needs to be understood, because we are looking at it from a two-dimensional idea. We are looking at everything from a two-dimensional aspect, that this is length and breadth. But there is,
Correct.
when Krishna looks at it, he looks at it from a multidimensional aspect. He's looking at civilization or humanity or whatever, life itself from a larger perspective. Like he says, this is my yoga avastha, because never before and never after he refers to himself as Bhagavan Uvacha. It's only in that 18 chapters he talks himself from a yogic perspective, that he has gone into deep contemplation. and I'm speaking to you as somebody else now. I'm not the
Right.
Krishna that you see. I'm somebody else now. And
Mm.
immediately afterward, it goes back to being Krishna Sakha. So I think there is
Yeah.
a larger philosophical understanding that misses a lot of the research that has happened, because we look at life from a test tube angle, that is
Mm.
like you said, empirical
Yeah.
evidence based angle,
Right.
where philosophy doesn't really come into play.
Yeah.
And I think even beyond that, I think, like you said, all of the sciences that we talk about are all bhautik sciences. They're all based
Mm-hmm.
on what I can see in an indriya janya dhyana. But
Mm-hmm.
what is atindriya dhyana, like Krishna talks about, that I can, my intuition takes
Mm.
me to somewhere. Because I always give that example. How does somebody come up with a poetry?
Mm.
Where does it come from? Some part of the brain? Does it come from some part of the nervous system? Where does
Mm.
poetry come from? Where does art come from? Why doesn't it come from the same? Why does somebody else create it and not me? If I have
Mm-hmm.
the same anatomy,
Yeah.
why can't he or she create it and not me? Because their intuition is on a different level, and their perception is on a different level. I think that's where we miss a lot of the beat,
Mm.
because we look at what we can dig to be understood. But what I wanted your input was that history, or Indological research, especially on philosophical concepts, done so far, has presented a whole different picture to the world of what we understand as the Indian narrative.
Mm.
But now that you look into it, now that scholars like you are researching in it, and we have coming across a very different perspective, we are coming across a very different view of this whole thing. How would you compare, sir? How do you compare what happened, say, 300 years ago, and now this whole new journey, sir?
Okay. Um, so you mentioned like see, any extreme or only this,
Hmm.
that kind of attitude is what is problematic.
Yeah.
Okay. So only this. For example, if you're looking at Bhagavad Gita, only bhakti,
Hmm.
only yoga, only jnana, and that becomes a challenging thing. So for example, I showed the what is that? Shraddha, Samshay, and Jidnyasa.
Hmm.
uh, and I don't want to spend time. I think I discussed that 2 days ago somewhere. What if one of the three dimension is missing? You said very well that we are working in a two dimension
Yeah.
and Krishna was working in the multi dimension. So my thoughts are this: we need all of this. We need a philosophy like our whole darshana shastra, for example, shad darshana, right? um, and we also need to connect that with a
Hmm.
empirical in the sense of a observe experiential. Okay.
Hmm.
So for example, Krishna also says pratyaksha avagamam dharmyam,
Hmm.
so you can experience it yourself. This is not something to be make believe kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we have to bring it together, and in some sense that is happening
Yeah.
now. Talking of last 300 years, many reasons why maybe things didn't happen as much as they should have happened in India,
Hmm.
but because they are not seen in the last 300 years,
Hmm.
people are also especially Indians, forget others, especially Indians are under the impression that India never did anything.
Yeah. Sadly.
Huh? Yeah.
Sadly.
Where and so therefore, when even the Western economists did the studies, I'm not getting the names right now, but the Belgian individual and then the American individual, and they found India and China were contributing 50+% of the world's GDP. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And how was it? I mean, they did study for last 2000 years. In fact,
Yeah.
the first individual did for like a 500 years.
Yeah.
This was a Belgian guy, Byron, I think.
Hmm.
And then another person, because when Byron came out with the report, nobody believed him. How can India be? This was by World Bank, sanctioned by World Bank. How can India and China be the one? So they commissioned another study, and I think it was Madison, if I remember the name correct. And he actually said, why not go even back beyond 300, 400 years? He went to 2000 years,
Hmm.
and he found even more glorious picture for India. Okay, in terms of, I'm talking dharma, artha, kama, moksha, not just like a pure philosophy. So
Yeah.
my quick point there is we have to bring those together,
Hmm.
and what we can study, even the that multidimensional, it also depends on the science and technology available at any point.
Yeah.
Now, in the yogic science, I would say we have actually, and in our times we are, and now we might be seeing the resurrection, but we saw a degradation over last few hundred years. I don't know how, I don't have a exact time or anything. Whereas these people could say many things. I mean, we have this amazing thing that it's impossible to believe. I'll just talk of astronomy, not specific details. You are seeing those videos. Impossible to believe. Like, how did they know this, and how did they combine, and how they remembered the knowledge? So the point is we have to bring it together, and in some ways it is happening with the modern science also. It is happening, like with the quantum mechanics and whatnot. Now our challenge is not to make these artificial designations and think one is lower than the other, like this whole fight of bhakti is lower than jnana, jnana is lower than this. So for example, Krishna talks of four types of udara etaiva bhakta, right? Artha jidnyasu, artharthi, jnani cha bharatarshava. We need those jidnyasu bhakta, so we need jidnyasu bhakta who actually will take something from our philosophy and do something, very practical solutions for, first thing initially as a for India, I would say, but for the world.
Yeah. And very well put, sir. Something that I think we discussed before we began the session is something I want to draw your attention to again, because we look at the world today we live in. I mean, I'm sitting here in India, and you are sitting there out there in America. So we have this east and west perspective. We are looking at the whole world from both these angles, and we see that there is this huge uh, crisis of perspective right now, as to which direction is the whole thing going, with the epidemics and with wars looming constantly on the threshold, economic crisis, and general this feeling of anxiety that is there currently. I think this has been with humanity forever. I mean, humanity is
Correct.
always concerned about what is going to happen down the line all the time.
Yeah.
It's not as if
Yeah.
today it's something different. It was the same 20 years ago. It's only that did not have access to media so
Hmm.
much to know that this was happening somewhere in the world.
Hmm.
So how do we now then use all the Indic narrative, which is so profound and so complex also at the same time,
Hmm.
to shape today and the coming time? Because that is going to be very important or paramount at some level, that we come up with some idea, some solution to what the dilemma that humanity is facing, because we can't live like this forever. I mean, this is not
Yeah.
going to be the future that our children will inherit. I mean, all
Hmm.
the good works that people are being doing out there needs to be now compounded and made into some kind of a vision for the
Hmm.
next 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. What do you think can we extrapolate from the last 10,000 years going ahead into the future, sir?
Okay. Yeah, just my 2 cents. So as Jnaneshwara said, it all begins here. You have to have in the mind as a thought, or do you want to do it
Yeah,
before it happens.
yeah,
So I came to say America. It's not like magically I closed my eyes and suddenly I was in America. Right? Somewhere I thought, hey, it will be nice to go and see how America is. Whatever the reason, the attraction that I might have heard or whatnot, or the education. So it starts somewhere here. So people have to start here, which many actually do. The challenge is then they think it is somebody else's responsibility. Like in the social media you will hear, oh, why doesn't government, so with my work, like they will ask, so when is the government going to put it into the textbook, my work? Or they will say, Nileshji, but when are you going to write a textbook?
mm,
And they think it's as simple as me writing another book and that becomes a textbook. No, it doesn't. It doesn't become that way. It is a huge bureaucratic process. So the idea, having an idea is a good, but then one has to have a specific aim. Like I want to, and people start thinking suddenly putting the man on the Saturn. No, no, no. For your own thing, wherever you are, that is a Swadharma again concept. You can simply say, what can I do different for myself? Like if I'm not doing exercise, start Surya Namaskar. But then for my family, then for my neighborhood, and then for, as you go bigger. So that has to start with Swadharma, something that you can do. I mean, one can do, not a suggestion for others. I mean, there are enough suggestions, and suggestions are good. I mean, I take it very positively. I'm sure you take it positively. But there's only people don't realize until they actually do it
yeah,
what it takes to achieve something.
mm,
That dogged determination. Like if you were to use the Ramdas Swami's example, where people read Dasbodh, Manache Shlok and feel fascinated. Okay, so like Ramdas Swami is just talking and telling so much. What they forget is for 12 years, Shivtargarh or wherever he was, and not even any connection with the world, and just doing his tapasya. So Bhagavad Gita has that in Vinoba's, Ekanta Vishay Priti Jana Sangata Navada. Initially people feel fearful. Like my friend, when I was researching, and even otherwise also they asked, Nilesh, don't you get bored on the weekend? I said, I don't get bored on a weekend or a weekday, day or night. I mean, I have no time to get bored. Okay, so I think you have to bring that state, and that comes from that Artha Jidnyasu, Artharthi, and Jnani. You can select whatever, one can select whatever suits their psyche. but do something. It can be very small, and in every small way, what a person can assist others, person can do something of their own.
Yeah.
And when that is seen, the other people, actually the resources start coming together, people start noticing it. I mean, that's how you and me are talking today, right?
Yeah. Very, very, very well said. And I think from a lot of what people have asked me, around 100 questions, I can't ask you all of those. But I think what I can draw as a conclusion from what people are seeming to ask you, or from you know uh, get your opinion on, as going forward now, how do you see the world shape? Do you see all that is dharmic, all that is the positive humanitarian influence? Do you see that shape humanity coming forward, or do you think we're headed towards a deep dark times?
Okay. No, I'm a eternal optimist, so I don't see it's going towards dark times at all. Yaskacharya, the Niruktakar, he defined Sanatan Vedic Dharma, the Sanatan word,
Yeah,
and that's why I think it's a guiding light for the whole world,
yeah,
which is, he said, Sanatano Nitya Nutana,
yeah,
something that, so it's not an old philosophy that something you just sit and read in the temple. That's what many Indians think. Americans don't think like that, by the way. How sincerely they approach is mind boggling.
mm,
If they approach something, like you are very much involved, I mean, you are propagating and researching this whole Agnihotra, as aspect. I am ignorant of it, other than my wife Ashwini does a form of Agnihotra, I would say. In fact, I'm reading these documents. I forwarded the documents that Prasad sent to her, because she's the one in charge of that. But I'm saying, so you are studying in own ways, so it's not like you're just saying, hey, that's how it is done, therefore it is done. I saw the paper, some research work published by you,
yeah,
where you are saying the effect of before after
yeah,
kind of thing, which is empirical, right? So everyone has to do that, so I don't see that as a negative.
yeah,
Just like I showed you the framework at the beginning, so sanshay can be positive or negative, shraddha can be also positive or negative,
mm,
right? The buddhi can be also as a positive, negative. So we think buddhi is good.
mm,
Okay, but if it's of a tamasic kind, then it's adharmyam dharmyam itiya manyate tamasa vrita sarvarthan viparitamsha buddhi sa partha tamasi. Everything the person sees in the opposite way. So people worry about, oh, what about this social media?
mhm,
Okay, I consider, and technology.
yes,
I mean, I consider what a fabulous thing it is, depending on how you use it. Like we are right now on through technology,
yeah, yeah,
it's not stopping us.
yeah,
Say even the social media platforms like a Facebook and the Twitter and whatnot, they are used in a many negative way. I mean, much negative way, and people just worry about it, and rightfully so. But I will also tell you, much of my research of last 25 years, but especially I would say last 10 years,
mm,
I came into the so-called light after that book. So last 10 years, and many wonderful researchers around the world, great academics around the world, I met through the social media.
mm,
And we continue to do the research. In fact, if you are seeing some of the research like Mrs. Rupa Bhattiji, and we are doing all that, I mean, we met on a Facebook. In fact, we
oh,
don't remember when we met. So that's a positive, very positive thing.
okay,
And just like in old times, the Rishi could see at a distance. Now they saw necessarily not through the physical means that we are doing right now. Um, but it doesn't matter, right? The
yeah,
fact, the ultimate thing is that they could communicate over a distance,
we connect,
telepathy,
yes,
and we can communicate over a distance too. So I see a very positive future,
yeah,
positive today also. I mean, as you said very correctly, even when it feels like, oh my God, what is this challenge?
yeah,
Well, we have not seen the epidemics. I
yeah,
mean, in our lifetime, possibly this is the biggest
yes,
epidemic that
yeah,
we might be seeing.
yeah,
So I see it's a very positive. I mean, the things will come and go.
mm,
And as long as we are willing to refresh ourselves and not think that we have found the last word,
mm.
the journey would continue.
Fantastic. And that's, I think, exactly what we believe here as well. That we believe that we are headed towards greatness. We
Hmm.
believe that humanity will ascend now towards greatness. And that's, I think, what Paramsad Guru himself said, that humanity will become one.
Hmm.
Uh, and then you will collectively, everybody will rise towards a greater excellence. I think that's what we are heading towards. We as a group of Agnihotra performers worldwide, we believe we are at the threshold of greatness. That
Hmm.
we are going to cross over into a wonderful way of living, and come together as humans, not just as different races or different cultures or different
Hmm.
nationalities, but come together as a species and shape this planet, shape this whole world towards greater excellence. I think exactly what you also believe. So yeah, there's a lot of connection here,
Yes,
lot of nice things, and it was wonderful to know that your wife also does Agnihotra. And in any way, if you could help her, please do let us know. And then
definitely.
in the closing, I think we would just love to invite you whenever you do make a trip to India, do come down to Shivpuri, our ashram here in southern Maharashtra. And you're a Marathi speaking person, so you know Akkalkot and you know this part of
Yes,
the world.
yes. Yeah, Sri Swami Samartha, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So we are part of his lineage, we are part of the same ashram. So this is the
yeah.
same foundation that works, taking his work forward worldwide today.
Yes,
And I love to hear from you again. Maybe do the another session in Marathi someday.
definitely, definitely. And
Whenever you
thank you
like.
very much for inviting me. But this was a wonderful conversation,
Yeah.
and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all the wonderful knowledge. And most importantly, thank you very, very much from all of humanity for doing all the wonderful work that you are doing. We need this. We need to know more. We need greater insight. We need greater clarity. And it's thanks to researchers like you that we're going to see this happen. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you. And thank you for giving us time again this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.